Thank you very much, everybody, for coming along to my talk. So my talk is creating change by exposing the best industry standards. And I do apologise, we do have this taskbar still on the screen. I can't quite get rid of that, but everything else should work absolutely fine. Okay, so yeah, I'm Sean, and I work at Animal Justice Project, so I'm a campaigner. So my first day on the job was actually at this conference a year ago today. So now I'm back again, giving a talk. So a little bit about my background. So I've been organising street activism for about 5 years now. So that was primarily in Cambridge, where I ran my local community group. I've also done a lot of stuff with vegan runners. I've done a lot of races, and my academic background is in English literature. So I'm just finishing my PhD. Just got the very final corrections to do. Yeah, just a few other little bits. So I've freelanced as a writer. I've written for a number of different publications, but my main interests sort of in animal advocacy are kind of narrative and storytelling and how we can kind of use this within our organisations. So my talk content, so I've got about 30 minutes to kind of go through my topic. So I'm going to go through an introduction of who is Animal Justice Project, what do we do, what's our focus, what are our goals. And I'm going to go through assurance schemes and welfarisms, which is a large part of kind of who we are and what we're sort of advocating against. And I've got a few case studies as well of our own work. So I'm going to talk about an open rescue that we did, specifically on an RSPCA assured farm. And then we're going to look at a creative video, which is like a spot the difference exercise. So there is a poll in the app. So when we get to the creative video, just sort of if you could just answer the question in the poll, that would be very much appreciated. And then I'm going to go over why do we specifically target these high welfare farms and this high welfare branding. And then we'll just sort of go through summary and questions and then recommended reading as well. So Animal Justice Project. So what's our mission? So we started 10 years ago and we focus on the complete end of animal farming, the focus there on the complete end. So we do this by exposing the industry directly through undercover investigations to show the reality of the UK farming system. So from this investigative content that we gather, we create and deliver campaigns that amplify the content that we get on the farms. So our mission is a society free from animal exploitation. And we work within 5 key areas to achieve this. So undercover investigation, so directly exposing the reality, pressure campaigning, educational initiatives, so educational media, literature, videos, event organisations. So we've got a very diverse kind of event system that we use. I'll show you that when I get to my next slide. Yeah, and then public engagement, so outreach, and then successful PR as well. Okay, so what is my job at Animal Justice Project? What do I do? So as a campaigner, my work directly focuses on bringing our work to the public. So I create and deliver campaigns. Most notably, I worked on the RSPCA Assured campaign last year, and I've just helped launch 2 new campaigns specifically focused on the dairy industry. So as anybody in this room will know, if you've worked as a campaigner, it's an incredibly diverse role. No 2 days are quite the same. So recently, I've taken the lead on my first investigation launch, crafting the story to go with the content before releasing it to the public. So that's our Lowfields Farm investigation, which was just featured in over 25 news publications, including 5 nationals, and we got an international, so we got in Belgium press as well. So this was one of our most hard-hitting investigation releases, and it's all thanks to our undercover worker who captured some horrific scenes on the farms. On the farm, and it really shook the nation. So just as a little plug, we do have a protest at this farm next week, next Saturday. It's in North Yorkshire, if anyone's sort of in that region. So we have a number of different campaigns targeting very specific elements of the industry. So I'm just going to give a very quick, brief overview of each of our sort of broad campaign categories here. So we've got Lives Not Stock, so exposing the trauma and distress animals endure during transportation. And then we've got Expired, which highlights the suffering of cows in the dairy industry, particularly high humane farms. And then we've got Scams, so it's all about the failures of the UK government to protect animals. Respect All Life, which is a broader kind of campaign which is more about advocating for veganism. And then we've got expose, so focuses on the mass culling of animals during disease outbreaks. And then the foul truth, which is all about the British poultry industry. I don't like to use the word poultry, but it sums it up a bit. So fishing hurts as well raises awareness about the overlooked cruelty of fishing practices. So, and then a lot of our campaigns kind of have further subdivisions as well, which kind of brings us over to our current focuses of this year. So we've got 3 sort of big focuses this year. So Project Pig is a strategic campaign, so it's all about applying pressure on the UK pig industry to shift the narrative that pig farming is not a necessary component of society and hinders moral progress. And then we've got Alarming, which was our low fields investigation, so we're specifically targeting the Arla brand. And then Utterly Kind, so we're advocating for a dairy-free future. So this is our Starbucks campaign that you may have seen on our socials. So we're urging Starbucks to use oat milk as default milk, and in the future we kind of want to push and broaden this campaign to include further cafe targets and other businesses. So sort of a bit of an overview of our campaign actions here. So you can see we've got quite a few sort of very bold, very big statements here. So we've got the climbing of DEFRA in 2022, which is just on the bottom right there. So that was just about ending animal agriculture to prevent further pandemics. We've got a Darlington Rooftop National Beef Expo on the top left, which was a very, very strong and clear message to all the farmers that were in attendance of that expo. So there was 5,000 members of the industry there, and as they turned up, they were met with us. That was quite a shocking thing for them to see as they went to their expo. And then we've got projections onto the House of Parliament there on the top right, which was about the livestock bill, just not including chickens, turkeys, and ducks there. And then we've got our billboard campaign, which was from last year. That was in 5 key cities, so that was in Birmingham there. And I've got another slide here, which is just a big, broad overview of the kind of diverse tactics we use. And as you can see, it's very varied. We've got non-direct violence. Sorry, get my words out. So we've got street outreach, political lobbying, guerrilla marketing. We've got farm protests, supermarket sit-ins. I'm not going to go through them all here, but I want you to see that we use every single tool at our disposal, and I think that's really important. Like, as an organisation, is one of our beliefs is that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the dog down here. She's called Greta. She's Claire's dog, who's our founder. But yeah, the diverse content the diverse approach we do really kind of helps bring our investigative content over to the public. So you can see here we've got an ad van there, which I think that photo was in London, and that's just showing some investigation content directly. We reached absolutely thousands of people that day. So that brings us over to our investigations directly. So we've done 22 to date. So a number of these have been multi-farm exposés as well. So we've got multiple farms in each investigation release, and we're exposing elements of the industry that other people haven't quite done before, like other organisations. So it's like industry first exposés. We've got chicken catching gangs, we've got boar semen collection. And this is really to kind of highlight to the public every single aspect of the industry that perhaps they wouldn't have seen before. So they're normally very well hidden. So we're trying to get these specific focuses here. So investigation methods. So our investigation team is highly skilled. They're very specialist and they've got years of experience of field work. So they gather intelligence using highly sophisticated, tried and tested methods and surveillance techniques. So the material is watertight and it can be used for prosecutions in courts. So we've used installed cameras inside farms and slaughterhouses. We've had hidden cameras on workers who have posed as farm workers. We've done open filming. We've had drones go over farms. So, and of course, with each investigation release, we're always trying to juxtapose the reality with the greenwashed and welfare stuff that the industry produces, like the reality versus the marketing claims. So our investigations help us show the consumers what's actually happening. So we go for these high welfare farms protected by assurance schemes because we really want to show the public that there's no right way to do the wrong thing. So if we can reveal that even the farms dubbed as high welfare are just as terrible, then perhaps the consumers will realise that all farming is terrible. Okay, so that brings us over to welfare washing. So as we all know, the industry is trying to sell a product and they want to convince the nation that it's morally acceptable to buy their product. So in order to do this, they mask it behind a smoke screen of ethical claims. We all know this, we've all seen it. So I've used Happy Egg here as a perfect example. So recently this deceptive marketing has been called welfare washing by Gen V, but previously I've seen it termed as humane washing. So the terms are kind of interchangeable. So it's essentially about using these marketing tactics to convince consumers that something is humane and ethical when it's not. So it's often employed at the same time as greenwashing, as many welfare claims come through green imagery like this. So the industry employs its own advertising to reinforce these false narratives and images of farming, but it also creates further consumer trust through assurance schemes and welfare commitments. So assurance schemes, so what are they really? Who are they actually for? Do they make a difference? And is arguing for welfare counterintuitive to progress within our movement? So that's kind of really what I want to challenge people on here today, is to think about if we should be using welfare in our strategies. So assurance schemes, they're marketing tactics again, employed to make consumers feel better. They claim to be about the animals, but they're not about the animals. So they provide a certain level of welfare that our investigations have proved entirely false time and time again. So every single farm we investigate, it always tells the same story: numerous welfare breaches, horrific suffering, and this is systemic across the industry. The entire industry is rotten regardless of these labels. So red tractor assured, RSPCA assured, free range, it's all meaningless for the animals trapped on the farms. So assurance schemes, they claim higher welfare, but it's not that in the reality. So they're designed to benefit the producer and the consumer. So that it's about increasing sales, revenue, and it's also to make the consumer feel better about themselves. They feel better because they buy these free range products. But that's why, as animal rights advocates, I don't think we should get sidelined with arguments for welfareism and improvements, because in doing so, we're still validating farming. We're just validating better farming, as the industry would have it. But I'll get more to that towards the end of my talk. So that just brings me on to a really good book I kind of want to reference and sort of bring to everyone's attention here. So it's called The Humane Hoax. So it came out last year, and there's a number of fantastic essays in there that really sort of get to the root of this. So I've got a couple of quotes here on my slides. So I'm just going to quickly read out the first couple. So there's simply no label, no marketing campaign, no comforting image, no reassuring advertising that can rationalise, assuage, or justify the inherent cruelty of animal agriculture. I think it's a very strong quote there. And then the second quote is by Carol J. Adams, who's a fantastic feminist critic. But she says, first they murder the victims, then they murder the language. And I just think that's so powerful because, as we all know, the animals have lost their lives, but the industry has completely warped and destroyed the original meaning of words like humane, like what they originally meant. So I won't read out this quote here, but it just kind of reinforces what I'm saying here. So the hidden realities of farming. So the results of, so we recently did a YouGov survey specifically about the dairy industry. So I'm just going to read out a couple of points from that we found. So 52% of people were completely unaware that cows are impregnated each year to enable milk production. 82% were unaware that dairy cows are typically slaughtered at 5 to 7 years old. So the public are completely unaware of these very, very simple and basic facts. So it's clear to us that the system completely fails the animals. It's all about driving profit for farmers. and then perhaps something with greater transparency and accuracy might be needed to allow people to understand the reality of farming. But I think the level of transparency we would want as an organisation might not quite reflect what others would argue for. So in 2023, so the Bryant Research Centre, so they're here this weekend giving a talk as well. So they carried out a survey to 1,000 members of the public, and they found out that 91% of people wanted more transparency in food labelling. So the key word here is transparent, not schemes or welfare stamps, but wording that indicates what the farm actually is, rather than these nonsensical words that don't really add any meaning, like reared by trusted farmers. So similarly, our YouGov survey found out that 17% of people agree that dairy companies, only 17% of people agree that dairy companies provide consumers with enough information about how milk and dairy products are consumed. So there's kind of a wide sort of consensus here of the public not being aware of what's actually happening in farming. But I don't think there would ever be a labelling scheme that really reflects the real horrors and the reality of what happens on farms. So there's never going to be a label that says gassed or slaughtered at 5 years old after milking or killed at 18 months old. So it's clear the public want greater transparency, but how much do they really want and how much do they really need? So the kind of questions I want us to think about. And I think that's where we come in as an organisation, because we're about exposing the reality that people really need to see. So that brings me over to the cage-free commitment. So sort of going to summarise this before I get into our investigative findings in a bit more detail. So all major UK supermarkets had to sign up to this. It was a voluntary commitment to sign up to selling eggs that were from cage-free farms. So there have been 2,000 commitments nationwide, and it sounds like a positive thing, cage-free farming, and there are organisations that do advocate for that. But as our investigations have shown us, cage-free farms, whether barn or free range, they're still intensive farms where profit is the highest priority. It's still about it's still about output and creating yield. So although these free-range hens must have continuous daytime access, so it's 8 hours for them to be RSPCA assured, this can be a minimal of like one pothole between 600 hens, where really like the more aggressive and frustrated hens could guard the entrance. So there'll be hens on this farm that never go outside despite this free-range stamp. It's an incredibly high-stress environment. The hens have disease, feather loss, mites. It's still very intense farming. So it's not really any better than a cage. And the hens, of course, all still meet the same end. So the consumers have been totally duped into thinking that cage-free farming and free-range farming are ethical, which we've proven many times over that they're not. So just a little case study here. So this is me and my co-worker inside an RSPCA assured free-range farm. So as you can see, it's very barren, very, very unpleasant inside. So yeah, these were all labelled as high welfare, free-range eggs. And then because of this RSPCA assured logo, free-range logo, people were convinced that it was morally acceptable to buy these eggs. They were cage-free hens, but the conditions they existed in were simply terrible. So RSPCA assured is stamped on 51% of UK egg-laying hens, and this is based on their 2022 annual review stats. So as you can see, it's not very pleasant inside. So upon entering the farm, the first thing me and my colleague actually found was the head of a decapitated hen. I won't show that image on here, but we don't know how the hen lost her life. We never saw the rest of her body. We just found her head when we entered the farm. But I think this alone bespeaks the reality of it. So we only entered one shed on the farm. There were multiple sheds, and they had very similar tragedies inside. The hens we did see, they experienced a large degree of feather loss. They were incredibly unhealthy. They were cramped together on these perches, sort of staring just into the dark. They had access to the outdoors in the daytime, which was an incredibly sad and barren patch of earth, which allowed the farm to be dubbed as free range. The space wasn't big enough for the hundreds of birds that were crammed in the sheds anyway. And the hardest bit of the open rescue was just picking a couple, because as we know, sanctuaries are very full. We couldn't take as many as we would have liked, but we managed to rescue 3, and every hen in that farm deserved a life of freedom. Not welfare washing, but we could only save 3 of them. And that brings us over to a bit more evidence that we also have. So our investigations, so it wasn't the first RSPCA assured farm we'd been to as an organisation. So early in 2024, we'd investigated 5, all showing the reality of the scheme. So I'm only going to show a couple of images on my slide. I'm not going to show any investigative videos, but I think this kind of really shows the reality of what the farms are. So we've all seen the green and welfare washed content. This is radically different from that. So this is the reality of cage-free farming. So our investigation release at the time, so it was featured in the Sunday Mirror, the Independent, and for lack of time, I'm just going to focus on one farm here, which was Harper Farm, where 16,000 hens lived in one shed. So that was where the images from that previous slide came from. So severe feather loss again was common. We filmed, hens with red and real bloody raw wounds. And then feather loss is often caused by pecking and stress and boredom. All these hens just crammed into these sheds together. And there was red mites as well. And we found dead and dying hens. And in some studies as well, we've got a study that I referenced at the end from Cambridge University that have shown that cage-free systems can actually be worse than cage systems because of the level of stress that the birds experience. So images from this investigation content, it made it onto protest signs and outreach signs, and we took that to the streets in August last year to educate the public directly. So we facilitated over 20 outreach events across the UK to show the public directly. So the investigative realities fueled the success of our outreach, and a number of teams reported positive success and really great conversations with the public. And this is a model we often follow with our campaigns. We have like a shocking and powerful investigative release, and then we follow it up with a campaign to educate and implement change, getting volunteers involved, getting them in their local communities to outreach. And that really helps us amplify our reach beyond just being online as well. So other tactics we use are marketing tactics, sometimes paid for, sometimes guerrilla marketing, to reach even more people. So I'm just going to lighten things up a bit and show a little video. Hopefully this all works. There we go. So the sound isn't playing, but that's not too urgent. So I don't have time to open it up to the floor, but if you just answer the poll in your conference app, just about if you did spot any differences, and I'll just get into a little explanation about what this video actually means. So while me and my colleague rescued 3 hens from a high welfare farm, we had another team rescue 3 hens from colony cages. We wanted to see if there was any difference in the health of the hens, and surprise, surprise, there wasn't. So we wanted to present this to our audience in a more novel way. So we took a different narrative strategy with this video, inviting the viewer to question and reach the same conclusion with us. And we wanted it to be interactive and more playful and get the viewers to really reach their own conclusion. So we posed questions to engage the audience, and we were careful to break the dichotomy of us and them. And as you can see, the hens, they looked exactly the same, and we wanted the public to see this too, but don't just take our word for it. So we went to the streets and we outreached. We had a sign, so you can see that image there of my colleague holding a sign there. So that was free range, cage free. And I can't even remember which one's which between the hens because they're so similar. So what did the public have to say? So we got responses from them. So they both look like they're in pretty poor condition. We got, I genuinely can't tell the difference. I think they look similar. They're both suffering, but one is sat down and suffering. So this is based on outreach we did in Cambridge. So we do have videos to go with this as well, but I'm not going to show that now. So yeah, all hens deserve a life of freedom, and these looked exactly the same, and they certainly all behaved the same when we took them to the sanctuary as well. So why high welfare? So we're specifically targeting these high welfare farms to show that essentially that these labels mean very, very little to the animals trapped on them. So by definition, working to improve conditions for farmed animals suggests that farming them is okay. It suggests that the problem isn't the farming, but the method. So this is why we're directly going for these high welfare claims. So there's always going to be unavoidable and inherent cruelties associated with producing milk, dairy and eggs. No label will change this, no welfare scheme, nor minimal improvements. Nothing will transfer the system. They will always violate the rights of animals. As such, it's imperative that we focus our efforts, energy and resources into ending the farming of all animals. Emphasis on ending here again. So we target these high welfare to show the public that there's no right way to do the wrong thing. And we want them to see that these labels do very, very little for the animals. And we know this as advocates, or we should all know this. And I know there's arguments for taking a welfare approach in terms of strategy, but I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should always focus on animal rights, because welfarism hinders progress and it directly opposes veganism. So that just brings us over to the enforcement problem. So I'm just going to summarize this very briefly here. So this is a report written by the Animal Law Foundation, and it highlights the problems of welfare laws and legislation. So the UK supposedly has the best animal welfare laws in the world. These statements fail to consider the reality of farming and the lack of due diligence and monitoring. Welfare laws are drastically under-enforced, and it seems very clear to us that it's not until an organisation like us investigates a farm that anything ever happens. So very, very few farms are inspected, and based on this report, it concluded that 2.62% of farms are actually inspected. So the poor enforcement of welfare laws of animals, it just shows the systemic failings of the system. So the industry, it fails time and time again to even enforce these laws that are in place, these laws that don't even protect animals. The industry doesn't even enforce these. So our recent investigation into Lowfields Farm, it really highlights this. So this was a farm that was really held up by the industry, by ALA. So it won numerous awards. It was held up as an example of farming done right. It won all these cream awards. And as soon as our investigation dropped, the industry kind of pushed them under the bus, so to speak. It lost their red tractor stamp, it lost their ALA contract, temporarily anyway, and a bank that was associated with the farm completely deleted all content of them on their social media and their website. So, and the industry responded to us with the usual PR line suggesting that they don't condone these practices, or this is just one bad farm. But the reality is very different. All farms are just as bad as this one. This is just one example. And again, just to kind of reiterate what I'm saying here, it wasn't until our investigation dropped that any of these welfare claims that the industry says they have in place were even inspected. Sorry, my slides will be available at the end. So the abolitionist approach. So philosophically, as an organisation, we are abolitionists. We urge all in the movement to take this stance to maximise our effectiveness and to facilitate more change collectively. We can't get distracted with this welfare claims. And I just kind of really want individuals to sort of think like, what would you want if you were an animal trapped in the industry? If you were a hen, if you were a cow, would you want someone fighting for your complete freedom, the complete end of the system, or someone advocating for you to have a few extra centimeters of room? Would you want your cage replaced by an incredibly cramped shed, or would you want animal liberation? And I know a lot of people are thinking in terms of improvements of billions of animals, but improvements are not enough. It's not good enough. Small welfare wins are not enough. They're a distraction. They're a false victory, and we need to go to the heart. We need to go for the heart of this industry and make no compromises. So that just brings us sort of to a conclusion here. So this is us at the Animal Rights March last year. So we've got our rights, not welfare signs, and I think this sort of summarises what we want to see in the movement, is this stronger argument from organisations to push for animal rights. So it was actually seeing these signs at the march a year before that drew me to Animal Justice Project as an organisation and made me want to apply to work for this organisation in particular, because I think it's such a strong and direct statement to others within our movement. And yeah, so these are just sort of my summary points here. So I won't read through these just because we're kind of coming towards the end of my talk here. So yeah, and here's the recommended reading list and the works I sort of cited through the presentation. So does anybody have any questions at all? We've got our social medias here if anyone wants to sort of look us up. Thank you. Yeah, we could start with one from the app and then.
So yeah, Sean, thank you very much. First question from Isabel McNally. Just raise your hand, please, Isabel. Thank you, Isabel. AGP's campaign names are quite punchy and creative. What's the process for coming up with these titles?
Planning ahead and lots of work. And I think the important thing is we're a very sort of collaborative organisation internally. Like, we've got a lot of very, very strong team members, and we work together on all the content. Our designer is brilliant, our campaigns manager and founder, and we really work well together as a team. We're a very small team, and I think it's just planning ahead and working together to sort of make our content as strong as it can be.
Thanks. One from me. How do the public respond to the outreach you do, considering you're both doing this thing of exposing horrific suffering, which I think almost everyone will agree is really bad, and making this more radical demand of abolition of animal exploitation?
I think the public are generally very receptive at our outreach events. They always come over, they ask us questions, or we pull them over, we give them our leaflets. We do have a lot of successful outreach events. We use a lot of creative props as well as like a draw. So on one of my slides I had like an egg box prop, and that's just sort of to catch people's eye. So we're still trying to get them with a creative way as well, not just the hard-hitting imagery. I think on the streets you kind of need to be a little bit more versatile and you use different tactics to get people over. And I think that's also reflected with trying to get PR success as well. Like, I think if you just use the same kind of thing every event, like holding TVs, I mean, it's a very tried and tested method. It is brilliant, but I think if you kind of want to amplify your reach and get success with PR, you need to kind of become more versatile and use different things.
Thanks very much, Ron. One from Tony. Just raise your hand. Tony, thank you. Which social media platform do you see as being the most effective?
I think potentially Instagram in terms of reach, because we've just got, we're a huge following on Instagram, and we get a lot of engagement on there, and there's a lot of clever sort of things you can do with it, like ManyChat, where people respond and then you can automatically send like a direct message to them with a link or an image or a petition ask or something. So you can kind of really follow up things really easily in an automated way as well. Rather than just sharing, you can really use the platform to your advantage.
US with Signal. Of course, every messaging platform is only as secure as yeah how you yeah who will come into the messaging system in your group, right?
So in terms of like public content, we would just direct message on things like Instagram or Messenger. But in terms of like something a bit more that we want to keep internal, we use Signal for that mainly, or WhatsApp, depending on the specific content or event.
Time for one more question, I think. We'll go to an in-person one.
Thank you. That was really thought-provoking. I just wondered, I think you've just answered it partially there by saying about asks for people to sign petitions, but I just wondered what, when you're doing outreach or protesting, what your main asks usually are of people to ditch meat and dairy. Is it mostly for raising awareness and then for people to go and think about that?
I think it really depends on the specific campaign we're working on. In a broader sense, we're always trying to get people to choose vegan, to ditch dairy, exit meat, etc. But sometimes with specific campaigns, like we might be doing a targeted outreach outside a certain store or a place, and we would have a petition ask. So we would ask people, can you sign on? Can you choose vegan as well? Can you, back our work as well? So it's always trying to push people towards veganism.